Hello, Venerable Jitindriya. Thank you for joining me and us today. Just a few words of introduction. You have been involved in APCAP for a very long time, both as a teacher and as the Director of Training preceding me. You also are a psychotherapist, and although you're currently not practicing, I understand, because you're very busy being the spiritual director of Santi Monastery in Bundanon. Yeah, I've got that right?
Yeah.
So thank you for being with us today. So the question on everyone's mind, perhaps, or many people's mind currently is, how do we navigate this health crisis? What knowledge or practices can sustain us through a difficult time like this?
Well, it's a health crisis on a global scale, a crisis on many levels on a global scale, which is actually quite hard to fathom. It took me quite a few weeks to get my head around what was actually happening with economies being shut down all around the world and this pandemic crisis, which we didn't know the extent of yet. And I gather many people had similar reactions because it's unprecedented and such a sudden interruption to our ordinary, usual ways of getting on with living. So this sudden interruption, it can feel very abrupt and cause a lot of upset, concern, confusion for people, even fear or uncertainty or anxiety or anger even, looking at some of the responses that are happening on a government level. But a sudden abruption or change in our way of life or our life circumstances can also act as a real goad for awakening. So waking up, it's like snapping us out of our habitual, usual ways of doing things and being, and our expectations and projections into the future. And it brings up a lot of stuff for us internally and externally, like people are legitimately concerned about their livelihoods and what the future holds for their family. But also internally, lots of different things can come up, whether our external situation is threatening or not. So for Dharma practitioners, or for anyone really, I would say Dharma practitioners have a little bit of an edge, or spiritual practitioners who are used to contemplative practice may have a little bit of an edge, because we're thrust into this self-isolation or this isolating process. Those who are used to practicing meditation, being on retreat or having times alone, have a bit of an edge to know how to use this skillfully. When things change so suddenly, the main thing that comes up is uncertainty and perhaps disorientation. And this is a really key element of Buddhist practice, Buddhist focus on the experience of anicca, or uncertainty, or changeability, transience, when things change. This is a point of practice where we can really wake up. The emotional side of anicca can be felt as uncertainty or unsureness. And for most of us, if we're not familiar with that feeling in terms of letting it in, it can create fear or confusion. But if you get used to recognizing it, there's uncertainty arising. I don't know what's going to happen next. This is actually a very ordinary thing that happens in our lives, but when it happens on such a big scale, we might be really, confused by it or disoriented by it. But in terms of Buddhist practice, learning how to recognize, this is the feeling of anicca, of change, of something that is not within my control, This is a quality of the characteristic of anatta, or the empty nature of things. They're changing all by themselves according to their own conditions, law of conditionality. And suddenly we feel like, oh, I'm not in control in the way I usually think I am. Or I don't know what's going to happen in the way you usually project that things will stay the same. So making friends with this feeling of uncertainty, most people, it's like, oh, I don't want it. It's not comforting. But actually in our practice, the more we let ourselves come close to that and to breathe with it, to feel it out, to recognize it's a feeling within the body, sensation within the body, gives rise to certain emotions, but we can actually breathe with it. We can recognize it. We can recognize the mind state of confusion or anxiety it gives rise to. But this quality of uncertainty and this quality of change is a fundamental aspect of reality. It's not going anywhere. It's just come to the fore in this circumstance. So in that sense, it's like a big moment, potential for really awakening and working with it. So the skills we need to engage with is mindfulness of body, because this helps keep us grounded, it helps keep us present. And yes, we don't know what's going to happen. Making friends with those difficult, uncertain feelings. Can we just let them be in consciousness and breathe with them? Getting to the other side of them, we notice it's okay to be in not knowing for this moment. Mindfulness of the body gives us some groundedness, while the mind states can change quite quickly. But as we ground and as we don't grasp those changing mind states, a certain peace can come through. It's the peace of wisdom that sees a bit beyond this changing mindscape of mind states. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you. And as you were speaking, I feel my own body settle. Are there particular practices, mindfulness of the body practices, that you would recommend?
Well, firstly, mindfulness of the body, it's always about getting in touch with just the heaviness of the body as one sensation. Heaviness of body is one sensation. So wherever you are, in whatever circumstance, we can practice mindfulness of the body. For me now, just sending my attention to the feeling of the sensations of sitting on the chair, the weight to the body. So I'm just aware of those sensations where my bottom is on the chair. I feel that connection, my back on the backrest. And then as you recognize those sensations and sustain your attention there for a bit, you start to naturally feel the breath coming and going. The body is moving with this respiration. It's automatic, nothing you have to think about or have intention to do. And so just naturally you can let your attention settle on that rhythm of the breath, which is actually very calming in and of itself. Or at first, if there's a bit of fear or anxiety, you might notice the breath is quite shallow or rapid. But as you pay attention to it without any agenda, something opens, something relaxes. So there's this inherent benefit in learning to pay attention. You can still be, aware of thoughts coming and going, but our primary intention is to just to not get locked into the thinking and just keep coming back to the body very gently until it feels like a grounding space that you're rooted in.
Yeah, thank you. It's so simple and yet pretty profound, isn't it?
It is. It really is. Yeah. And one of the problems is our belief in the various thoughts that run through the mind, and our belief in their absolute importance. So you just have to practice to keep untethering from getting locked into those thought processes. They can still be there, but just think of them as flocks of birds flying to the sky until it gets down to one single bird every now and again.
I was just thinking, what kind of birds would my thoughts be?
Cockatoos.
different ones at different times.
Exactly.
One question that's been on my mind lately is, so the Buddha speaks about the causes of suffering being greed, hatred, and delusion. Now, this is the time of uncertainty, and as you said earlier, uncertainty easily leads to anxiety and fear. How come fear is not in those three causes of suffering when it is such a strong cause of suffering, really?
Yeah. Well, it is a effect of ignorance. Fear is a direct effect of ignorance. Ignorance is really a mistaken view of believing in a solid self, in a changing cascade of processes. Mm-hmm. And that belief in itself is fearful because it's not based in reality, it's based in belief, and therefore it's constantly being challenged. The ego sense of the need for security on an egoistic, narcissistic level, it never gets that, and so it's in a constant panic about trying to find it psychologically, emotionally, and physically. Mm-hmm. So really ignorance is, the emotional a basic emotional charge of ignorance, which is belief in a solid sense of unchanging selfness, is fear. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very interesting. Makes a lot of sense.
Mm.
Is there anything else you'd like to add before we say goodbye?
Well, I guess there's so much one can say, but in a brief moment, I would say, the profound need to bring kindness and compassion to one's experiences. So we can talk on the level of seeing the quality of anicca, of dukkha, and of anatta. So this changing experience of life, which can bring uncertainty, the painful aspect of that, and the empty nature of that, ultimately, not being able to find a solid sense of self. So those things in themselves can be quite challenging to see. But if you remember the importance of basing our inquiry in kindness and compassion, this connects us with the wisdom mind. So whatever we're doing, let it be from a place, if possible, of kindness and compassion. So even if we feel fear, even if we feel anger or upset, when we recognize the dukkha of that, can we ask ourselves first, how can I respond to this kindly, compassionately, with gentleness? And this attitude will guide us into seeing clearly the way things are.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All the very best to you and everyone in your community.
Thank you. And I send all my very best wishes and blessings to everyone who comes into contact with this. And thank you, Sabina, for organising this.
Thank you.